Yahoo! Prof here, and today we're going to test out this new Sony RX02 by giving you guys a walkthrough with this here system right there. That would be my repair PC, DryBones. Right now we are using the internal microphone on the RX02. We'll give this a shot for a video, see how it goes, because it's pretty quick and easy to pick this up. I got this as a replacement for my GoPros. Alright, so here is DryBones. We're going to kind of give you guys a walkthrough. We got the new backdrop with the new shelving system, so I can keep all of my projects easily organized. So first off, you can see it's in a full tower case. That is the Corsair 750D, which in my opinion is one of the best cases Corsair has ever made. If you watched this channel before, Frozen Slate has his system in a Micro GTX 350D, which I think still to this day is a solid case. So guys, just giving you a little bit of a walkthrough here. It's a little bit harder to control since I just have the little screen on the RX02, but it does do flip, and it pulls out much better than the first gen. You can also flip it towards you and use it for recording yourself, like I did a little while ago. This thing does burn through batteries, however. We're already a third of it down. So, alright, so the reason why I wanted to give you guys a walkthrough is this is my repair PC, DryBones, and it's an older system. I don't know if we'll be able to see it in here. Right up in there, it says Sabertooth X79. So this is actually an X79 based system. This is my old desktop. What ends up happening for my systems is I tend to build them plenty powerful enough where once I'm done with them, I can pass them down for another use. Usually the desktop becomes the home theater PC, and the home theater PC becomes the repair PC. The previous system was a Sabertooth X58 based system with a 920 and later a 970 in it. So not bad, even by today's terms, for something that won't really be used for gaming. Plenty for multitasking and that sort of stuff. But that system, just due to age, became unstable. So we went to this one after I bought some new desktop hardware, and I got some older hardware from Squeers when he upgraded his system to that 3900X. Now I have added some stuff to this system, and that's what we'll be going through here, as well as the mods I did. So we're going to start on the outside going in. On the front here, we have the additional panel you could get for the, I think this came out with, was it the 550D? But then Corsair did produce it for the 750 and the 350. It's a vented front panel, and rather than the solid one. Now, because this does have mesh on it, very thin mesh, you could also then remove and get much better airflow the actual air filter, which is probably what Gamers Nexus would recommend to you. I, however, have cats, and this system doesn't get used on the regular, so like I use it a lot when we're doing repairs and builds and stuff, but otherwise not so much. Now on the 750D, they intend for you to generally mount the fans on the outside if you have a radiator. That does put it pretty close to the air filter and the front of the case. So what I have done is mounted them on the inside, and I can do that since I'm not using these mounts in the back here for the solid state discs, because you could mount them vertically, which was a very unique thing back in the day. That was so you could show off your solid state discs, and before front mounted radiators had really taken off. in this case, I really think it's a pretty clean layout. This is with an EVGA 280mm, and we have 2 fans coming in the front and 2 in the front, and we have them in pull. That gives me the best amount of clearance. Since I am pulling through the front, they're not being stifled by the front of the case as much since they're set farther away. And then I have one on the back as the outtake. Now, what I did also do is, since it might be much quieter since the AC turned off. Now, up top here, we do have, I don't remember if this came with the 750D or not. It was either introduced with the 750 or the 350, and then they did allow you to buy one for the opposite. I think it might have shipped with the 350, and then you could get it for the 750 or vice versa. Now what I have done besides that, and that's just there for looks and to even out this surface since it's recessed a bit, since I actually have stuff that sits on top of here. But since I don't have a radiator in the top or anything like that, I have actually sealed it off with some very nice matte 3M vinyl. And I think that turned out really clean. And if I didn't need to even out that top surface, I would probably just leave the filter, which really you don't need to filter an outtake, but it just stops stuff from falling in and that sort of stuff. I could leave that off if I wasn't worried about keeping this as flat as I could. So besides covering it up with that 3M vinyl just to seal it off, because we're trying to get air in the front and out the back to go over all the components. We do also have a fanless PSU, since I happen to have one. It was originally in Chibi PC. Turns out I needed the fan on the PSU and Chibi PC to actually cool the system, since it only had 2 intake fans. Then it was in the home theater PC, but as that got better and better hardware, remember it got my old desktop, it needed something more than the, I don't know if this is a 450 or 550, but it needed more than that. So it's in this system. So this system should be pretty darn quiet. What I did do though is, let's flip up. If you can see up in here, might be kind of hard, but you don't notice anything for the most part, and that is because I actually have added some neoprene foam. I want to say it's about, you can see it in the back here too. This is stuff I already had from previous mods that I did on the home theater PC case, the Define R5. What I did is I can get a strip up in the back here just to seal off some additional areas where air would get out. That I tend to want my air to come in fans only and out fans only. I think it just really seals up, quiets up the case, especially if I'm going for that, and I can really control where the airflow is going, making sure it's actually going over the components, rather than, say, if you had people always ask, like, if you have an intake up top, well, it just gets sucked out the back. It doesn't actually go over any of this stuff. Now, sometimes I do have intakes up top, and then it goes in, especially with the tower cooler. I'll have it go in and out, and right out the back up top. Or if you're running a top rad, if this guy was up here, you could run a rear intake and just go in the back, out the top, which you're fine with because you've already redirected the heat using the radiator, and you should have 2 front fans pulling it onto the GPU and out the top then as well. So that I'm cool with. But otherwise, I did modify these panels to have sound dampening way back when I was using the 750D as my home theater PC case. So this is kind of just more optimizing it for my uses. Since I'm only using that 2 front intake and 1 rear, no reason to have that whole top open. And since I'd already sealed it up with that 3M vinyl that I think looks really good, might as well actually not like stop it up, but sound dampen it with some of that neoprene foam, which I can link in the description. It's actually not that bad. Had I also put this in and thought of doing that with a bigger piece, because I originally only had those little strips that are in the back there, I would have done it before putting the 5 1/4 inch bays in, because I could have gotten it all the way across the top. Since on this case you can put a fan way up here. You can't fit a fan and a rad, but like up there. So hopefully you guys will be able to see this pretty well. We're testing out the new camera today, and we're actually already pretty much gone on the battery. And I'll show you something annoying about the battery on this. There's Gertrude. Say hi, Gertrude. Yeah. Being all cute, cleaning your little paws. They do not ship you the battery charger with the RX02. It is $50 for a battery and the separate charger, and it doesn't use anything special. Not even Type-C. It uses Micro B. And it's just this basically Micro B to battery adapter, and it's $50 for one more of these little tiny batteries and the charger. This should ship with the camera. But I did get this basically as a replacement for the GoPros, so I can stick it up in the corner, or just have something I can more easily show you guys stuff. Normally I would not do a whole video with something like this, but it does seem like it would be higher quality having that 1-inch sensor. So thought I'd give it a shot. Normally I would also use external audio, but we'll see how it is this time. Alright, so going into some more of the front of this case here, as I block some of the light, we have a very classic drive. This is one that actually Linus has showed off in some of his more personal videos as well, and I keep it around for the same reasons. If you look, it's a DVD burner, CD burner, Blu-ray, not burner, just reader, but also HD DVD. Reads Blu-rays fine still. Not 4K. I have that in other systems though, so it's not really needed here since I don't really, rip, edit, anything like that on this system. But having that HD DVD as well as DVD, CD does do LightScribe as well. I think it even does those M discs. It's just a very compatible drive, and I've had it for a long time. Since it's working, no reason to get rid of it. We also have here that you might see in classic wood grain that I thought would go along pretty well with these Noctua fans. Was Hot Swap. So this is from, I don't know, it's a pretty cheap company, but I really like their Hot Swaps, because it's a 2 5.25-inch bays to 3 3.5-inch, and then most of these are going to have a pretty small fan. This one's been modified. So it has a 60mm by 25mm thick Noctua that I wedged in there. But normally it's a 70mm fan. Most of these are going to have 40mm. And then have some, they'll still use Molex for power and some dumb stuff like that. So this is using 2 SATAs to power it. And then it just has 3 standard SATA datas coming out of it. And they're in order. So they're not like some of them have them weird rebound and then some backplane or something. This being cheaper is actually more straightforward, which is part of the reason why I like it. And right now it goes one, because on X79, I'll go over this too. On X79, only two are SATA 6 gigabit. We have, if you see those right there, I have them labeled 5 and 6. And you can see in here there are actually 8. So top 2 are SATA 6 gigabit, then and that'd be on Intel controller. These 2 are then SATA 3 gigabit, and the bottom 2 are this awful Marvell controller that was brought from the X58, and it was awful back then, the Sabertooth X58. It was underperforming the Intel 3 gigabit controller on random back then already. Remember, this is a whole, 1 gen newer on high-end, 2 gen newer architecture, and they're still using a shit Marvell controller. Also, if you use that, it disables some lanes elsewhere. So just unless you need this for some reason, don't use it. I've used it for RAID 1 is fine. RAID 0, it's freaking awful. So if you need just a RAID, this used to be on that Marvell controller on the X58. Mostly just to have an easy RAID 1. So what it does is it goes 1, 2, 3, 4 because I do not need SATA 6 gigabit for the optical drive. And these are just hard drives, even though these WD Purples technically have SATA 6 gigabit compatibility. Hard drives don't really exceed SATA 3 gigabit or SATA 2, like SATA Gen 2. Optical drives don't exceed SATA Gen 1, 1.5 gigabit. I haven't tested with 4K Blu-ray, but back when I was doing Anthrax 7.0 build, I even tested going over USB 2.0 versus USB 3.0, and there was no major difference even with Blu-ray writing and reading. So this could be on anything. And I've adapted these before from SATA to eSATA to USB 3 and USB 2.0 internally to use headers and stuff. In this case, it's on the fourth one, which is SATA Gen 2 3 gigabit. So on the first one, this is going to be a SATA 6 gigabit Gen 3 slot. We actually have a drive already in here, and this one will stay in here. The nice thing too is you can lock these. So this one is one that will be locked because I don't want it to be removed, as it will be caching those RAID 1 hard drives. Those are what I use to back up my systems, people's systems that I help out. You want a RAID 1 array for backups at a minimum, if not more RAID, because that way if, say you back somebody's system up and your hard drive dies that it's backed up to, you don't want to lose their stuff. Well, something cool that you can do with any of Intel's systems since Z77, which is 3rd gen Intel, is Smart Response, which means you can cache not only hard drives, like one hard drive you can do, or one array of hard drives. So I've taken advantage of caching RAID 10 arrays, as well as in this case RAID 1. It's pretty common for me to set up for people a RAID 1 of hard drives for either editing off of or storage, and then cache it with an SSD. Now you can only use up to 64 gigs. AC kicked in. Not much I can do about that. This is a 256 gig 850 EVO, just what I happen to have extra. We'll use that extra storage for stuff like Steam, or if I do any editing, we can use that as a cache, since only 64 gigs of this are needed for actually caching those hard drives, and you can only use 64 gigs. That was because they expect they would have higher speed drives, kind of like how they're selling Optane today. Intel had specific SLC drives for caching way back in the day. Nowadays, I just kind of take advantage of it, since why not? So this one's going to stay in there locked. And then what I do is I have these two, and I have some more of those adapters. This, being number 2, will also be SATA 6 gigabit. Very, very handy if I plan to do backups of people's SATA SSDs, since that's pretty common now. And otherwise, we have up here a SATA 3 gigabit. Pretty common for me also to stick 2 drives in. I have a lot of bare drives I use for backups. Sometimes you want to copy from one to the other, or say I just want to move some stuff. I'll have one in here, copy it from there, pop it out. These are going to be set to hot swappable. This one will not, and I will keep this one locked so you can't, like say if I'm or I tell Preston or David when they're over, pop it into drive whatever, and they go and they yank the cache drive. If the system's on while that happens, that's not going to be great. So that's where those locks come in handy. And I have that same sort of setup upstairs temporarily, since my game drive is actually temporarily in one in there, running the same sort of setup there. I will say, doing this continuous 4K 100 megabit recording on the RX0, it does get a little toasty, but with the entire case being metal, it seems to dissipate the heat. My hand's getting warm, but it's not too bad. So one thing I will show you that I did, so notice how you can't tell that my optical drive is there, and you're probably wondering, why isn't it silver? Well, I did some kind of cheater tricks here. On the end here, I wrapped it all the way around to the other side with electrical tape. So this part that would normally stick out that is silver, it's now black. because electrical tape is very, very black. It'll stand up to heat since it's made to do that. And I just kind of wrapped it around there to hide this silver sticking out. Then on the side here, because normally there would be these clips that clip in here. I prefer to use screws for all my drives. Also, it's not like I need to quick release an optical drive or something. So I pull those off and just put screws in. But if you look in between the screws, I did, in this case, I used just like a oil-based permanent marker, a zebra. But I would recommend probably like a paint marker. And what you do is you just kind of outline where it is, pull the drive out, mark a little bit outside of that, and then that way you don't have to paint the entire drive. You can just paint the exposed parts. If I tip this, gotta find a good place to do this from. If I tip this system here, you can see that on this side, the silver, you can still see it, but it's on the side you don't see, so I don't really care. We'll get to the back side eventually. I think my cable management's pretty good, and that fan hub is one of my favorites. So one of the other things I was kind of waiting to finish this up with is I have it stuffed up here, these black flat SATA extensions. It's hard to find a SATA extension in all black, and a lot of the ones that you find sleeved still have a little bit of color exposed down here. And I can find 3 packs of those on Amazon, but I think due to the old Corona Chan, they were out of stock. So I needed one here to go from, because I'm using this capacitated SATA power right here, which I like using as well. To take one SATA power in and make it into 4, and there's a bit of Alright, so I actually don't know where we left off there. The camera actually overheated and shut itself off. So we're going to kind of backstep a bit and see what happened. So the little orange warning I was getting, I couldn't tell what it was. That's actually an over temp warning. So powered her off. What I just did a bit of cheating here. Grabbed the old reverse vacuum, popped the battery out, and the whole internal is basically exposed to that battery thing. So just blasted it for a good minute or so, and this thing's back down to temp. But I really don't think that Sony has this thing set up for continuous 4K 30 FPS 100 megabit recording, because remember how I said it was getting warm in the hand? Well, it eventually did shut itself off from being over temp. So back to what I was talking about now with these flat black SATA cables. I'll link them. It's a couple bucks for 3, and they're really, really nice, especially for the price and what they are. I just have that one running from this capacited power, which splits it off from 1 to 4, and then has capacitors just to balance the load when everything first starts up. We have 2 going into this hot swap. This is a pretty common arrangement for me. And then I wanted to get that optical drive nicely powered by one of these as well. So that extension just runs up the side from up here, and then just up there. And then there is another extension. Let me actually pull this out here. And then the other extension goes actually from that capacitated brick right here, and we need to get that around to the back to make it nice and clean, just so I could use less of the sleeved power cables. Ends up right there, extends it down over there. That way I can just have one SATA power coming off of the power supply. It splits from here, power supply, to another capacitated SATA power that goes to the 2 hard drives down here, and then one goes up to this, which powers the fan hub. So very nice and clean. I only need 2 SATA power for this whole build. One cable with 2 connectors coming off the power supply for this entire build, and then they go to an extension that goes to a 4 capacitated SATA power splitter, and then this one goes to the 2 drives I do have an extra one here if I ever need to, because I can still add another drive to that bottom cage. So one thing I did forget to show here is the front of this here. So what I did do is my old front IO was bad. So while I had this completely apart for the build, I actually ordered a new one. Corsair is very, very good about replacement parts. I would say one of the best because they're pretty big and you can just go on to their online store and order it. Fractal's pretty good. In the US, you're going to want to go through Puget Systems to get the parts. Otherwise, some of the more common ones can be gotten through their stores on Amazon and Newegg. In this case, I actually upgraded it because at one point Corsair did start selling upgrade kits or even the whole case coming with Type-C. If you see right there, so it has two USB 3.0, one Type-C port right there, and one USB 2.0. Here is front audio. Now, if you notice the front audio, I actually bought these to plug them up. You can buy kits with plugs for laptops. That's how I did this here. It would have actually plugged this up fully along with some of the stuff in the back. It's mostly just to keep dust out. In this case, it's not to keep dust out for here. It's just because these aren't set up. I use an external DAC. In this case, I have an older Firewire Roland one that's not made anymore. And this does still happen to have Firewire, which I do appreciate. Probably the last gen that has it natively. So these aren't even hooked up. I've even pulled the headers off of the back of the front I/O. So plugging those up that way, well, I know to not use them, but if people are over, they don't even try to use them. Then the USB 3, that's still in here. It's just disconnected, and it's not connected to the motherboard. But the Type-C is. And I'll show you how that works here. And then USB 2.0, much appreciated for older flash drives and just troubleshooting and stuff like that. So having one of those still in the front is really nice. I would have liked to have two USB 2.0. I know I'm going to sacrifice for the Type-C. Two USB 3.0 still working and the Type-C, but being an older board, that's just not going to happen. We can get more into this build a bit. So besides manually setting shutter speed, I have ISO set to auto, and it's always locked to f4 since it is just a fixed lens on here. We'll see how this goes. I'm just kind of leaving it in not full auto, but as almost fully auto. And we'll just see how this is working. So the reason why I have Type-C, and this is even though it's a Sabertooth X79, you're like, how the heck do you have Type-C? Well, Cooler Master, it's not Cooler Master, it's Silverstone. Cooler Master makes this right angle 24 pin, and I highly, highly recommend those. Love how that looks. Makes it much cleaner and easier to get that 24 pin with less of a bend. That specific one also has the capacitors in there, so that should help on startup with the load across that. And I think that those just look really, really smart, and generally puts it at the same height as the RAM, or just about. So you don't have to, just makes life a ton easier. So that's one of these little adapters, and that's kind of one of the other reasons why I'm going through this build, is because I used all these little tips and tricks and accessories since it's my own build. But it's like old hardware, so I'm not spending tons of money on hardware, so I do have a little bit of money to spend on these little like tweaks just to make life better. And to be truthful, if you have some excess space in the budget for your build, I would recommend getting these. If you've seen any recent builds like Frozen Slate's rebuild of his Darunia system in his 350D, which needed some kind of updates like this one, we did some of those in there as well. And it just like adds that nice little touch right on top of the build, you know, like just finishing it off sort of. So in here, and what we added was, this is a USB 3.0 header to the new Type-C header in the side there. And then you can plug that in, and since I got the new front panel, this now natively has proper Type-C. Now in order to get proper Type-C with the flippable USB, you know, like 3.0 or Type-C cable connector. It does have to use both ports up for that. And this is an older 5 gigabit, so you're only getting 5 gigabit speeds, but in every other way it's fully compatible with Type-C, and it can use that new header. So that's why I gave up the 2 front USB 3.0 ports right there for one Type-C, because being that most of my other stuff now has Type-C, at least one on the front, if not also on the, one on the back, if not also one on the front. Heck, even the server has that now. Most of my stuff now, except for my oldest SSD, external SSD, is Type-C. And if I do need, since it sits on my desk like this, it's really just as easy to access the back as the front. So if I do need a Type-A 3.0 port, we can just access one of the 4 on the back here. Yeah, that's a nice little adapter. So if you get a newer case for your older motherboard, or say if you have you do the same thing I did where you update the front I/O, or you could even go to a rear USB 3.0 Type-C if you don't update either of those things, and you can use that adapter to do it. Some motherboards that are newer than this might not have Type-C, like my X79 Sabertooth, and you could, since it has 2 3.0 headers, you could adapt one of those to USB Type-C, have it go out the back if you don't have a compatible case, or out the front if you do, and then leave the second one and then still use these 2. And this, buying the front I/O for this case, I think, well, I need to replace it anyway since one of the USB ports was bad. Might as well put the newer stuff in so that once this case gets an even newer motherboard, it has full compatibility. And the one thing I will say with cases, power supplies do eventually go out, but I run those for until I start having issues. But cases are one of those things where once I find one, like as you can tell with this one that I really like, I will adapt it over time to my exact use cases for it, because I see really no reason, like that case isn't out of date. You know what I mean? I did update the front I/O. You can do that yourself manually as well if they don't sell a kit. But like cases haven't really changed. So if this case fulfills all my needs, which it does, why not just, redo the build in it and maybe update it a little bit if required and keep using it. Like this one's definitely new enough, unlike an Antec 900 or something where you still have nice cable management in the back. To be truthful, I think this case is better than some of Corsair's new ones. I know 5 1/4 inch bays aren't the hottest thing anymore. For me, I still use them, especially on troubleshooting systems and stuff like that, just because it's nice to have them there. But they could very easily just remove this here and have the whole front open for fans. Went and overheated again on the RX02. I'm cooling off real quick using my reverse vacuum here. Highly recommended for cleaning out computers, and apparently cooling off the RX02. I just popped the battery out, blasted inside there, and we're back up and running. One thing I will say though, never had that issue with any of my GoPros. So let's resume this. I think I was talking about the USB 3. Then we have one thing I will say too, if you see my SATA cables are black with black connectors, and even the clips on the cables are black. You can get these in a couple of different lengths, right angle, which you can see back here on these hard drives. These are left angle actually, so those are okay gear for the left angle ones, since if you notice they go upwards. And otherwise, if you want the right angle or straight versions, what I recommend is, the silver ones with the silver clips down here. Those are the okay gear. The ones with the black clips, those are actually mono price. And you can get them real cheap, like around $1 a pop. I usually buy at least a pack of 10, if not 20, of both right angle and straight at the same time. That's especially if you do a number of builds a year. You're better off just doing that because you get some nice SATA cables. And then you don't have to mess around, and they're all black. I used to try and buy round ones, but I've had too many issues with those failing. I don't know if they're just not made to the same spec or what. So what's in here is this is a 3930K. It originally had, when I owned it, it had a 3820, and then when it became the home theater PC, it had a 4820K. It's been dropped back a generation to the 3930K, but that also brings it up to a 6-core, which I'd rather take over the 1-gen improvement. So if anybody needs a 3820 that you can't even read the label on, because I've rebuilt that system so often and I used IC Diamond, so it's basically rubbed off the etching, or like a brand new 4820K, well, let me know. And what we're running here for memory is this is a G.Skill 16 gig kit. These are sniper DIMMs, and these are 2400 speed, which is pretty darn quick for DDR3. I don't remember if the 3930K is going to be able to actually push them to 2400. They might have to be run at 2133. I do know that Squeers was having issues getting these to run at 2400 with his 5930K even, at least at lower cast latencies. His X79 Deluxe board, as well as the 4930K, are in the home theater PC at the moment. And then I have this exact set, actually, except in 32 gigs in the home theater PC. And if you're wondering how we ended up with it, and I haven't really been a G.Skill fan until they started really coming back with, they've done a really good job with Ryzen, having Ryzen not only compatible, but like Ryzen certified RAM available that would just drop in and work. Also, if you needed, if you notice, this is a quad channel kit. The only company that you can buy a new quad channel kit from, if you look around on Newegg and stuff, is really G.Skill. So that's how I ended up with, having not liked G.Skill in the past, having ended up with their RAM in almost all of my systems. Same thing with X79, getting a quad channel X99 compatible system, or set of RAM, when X299 was out. The only people that really had new sets available, especially in the sizes and speeds I wanted, like 3200, and I wanted a 64 gig set, and I later doubled that to 128 in my desktop. The only people that had that were G.Skill, and still available like on Newegg. And then what we have here is something I got a very, very good deal on. That is a MSI 1650. Now, this is the second MSI card that I own. I'm not a fan of MSI, but the deals I got on the one in the server back there, which is a RX 580 8 gig in the standard blower config, so that it only has, if you notice, this does not have, it only has display outs on the top, and the bottom is vented, so if I need to, I can lop off the second slot to make it fit where I want. That was on super sale, and happened to be the day I needed one. It was on sale on Newegg, and just happened to be MSI on sale with her, and then also with a rebate. Same thing with the 1650. This is one that they sell at Best Buy, and while I was looking up prices for it, Newegg had a better price on this exact card that Best Buy was selling for $200, on sale for like $160 before a rebate, and it had a rebate with it too. So that was cheaper than any EVGA, like stock cooler EVGA 1650. And then it did have, if you notice, it has dual display port and HDMI. A lot of the 1650s, being lower end cards, do not have the dual display ports, or it'll be like DVI. They might not even have a display port, but in this case, it has the dual display ports on it, and a better cooler, I would say. Now, this thing is droopy as hell. If you look at that, like, really could use a proper backplate on it, but we'll see how this goes. This is another case of MSI was so much cheaper that I picked them up. And if you're wondering why I don't like MSI, it's just my experience in the past. I mean, some of you have probably had it with other brands, but I've just had too many issues with their stuff, especially motherboards. Couldn't stand their UEFI. Navigating it was a pain in the butt, and I worked for a place that only used their stuff for a long time because it's the company that got the best deal on it. And I can tell you there is a reason why they got the best deal on the MSI stuff. Probably the case here too, but this isn't my main system. It will not be being used all the time. And the main reason why I went, for those wondering why I went 1650 on a system X79 that you're not using all the time, like why'd you do that? Well, I want to use NVIDIA's Studio Driver on this. Because I do run sometimes professional applications or need to in order to pull stuff for people. Or do I just want stability and compatibility? Since this is a repair PC, it is mainly used to repair other computers. And that Studio Driver gets you more compatibility with pro applications as well as stability. And you need a 1050 or newer. Well, even on the used market, a 1050 is going for like $100. Well, if I'm going to spend $100, I might as well spend $160 on a brand new 1650, or that was even before a rebate. So like older used cards now really are not like no, and I couldn't find anybody. I got a lot of friends on Twitter and stuff like that. Nobody had a 1050 that they were willing to get rid of because they like reviewers and stuff really aren't given 1050s. Or if somebody goes in and buy it, they specifically bought a 1050 for a reason. You know what I mean? Like, otherwise, normally you wouldn't have a 1050. It'd be pulled out of like a pre-built or something. But it's not old enough yet to get those like cheap pre-built cards on the used market yet, it seems. Or people are just overvaluing them. And this isn't just like this rebuild is. I've been trying to pick up components over the last year or so. So it's not just because of Corona Chan, but in general. So it just made more sense to put that money towards a 1650. It was kind of like with my grandparents when we did their build. They had no need for a 570 or a 580. Now you can get those for bang up prices when we were doing their build, but they just have no need for it. So I just chucked the 960 in there, and then once it loses software support, we'll see if I have another old card to pass along to them, or I'll see if I can get one used off a buddy at work, because that's where, once again, like a 1050 or newer would be great. But I'm not going to, like, they just need a graphics card. And I just need basically a supported graphics card for them. Same sort of thing here. I just needed 1050 or newer, but I wasn't going to put a bunch of money into a low-end 1050 when you can just get a 1650. The other reason why 1650 is good for this card is there's a high likelihood that, being that it's going to be down here for repairs and stuff, and it'll be right over there with that 4K monitor, that I'll be using it for streaming. The 1650 has the newest GPU encoder from NVIDIA. The highest quality one, the best performance one, even though it's the lowest end card. So that's the other reason why, if I'm going to spend $100 on a 1050, might as well, and especially because I can't get one used for a reasonable price, might as well spend a little bit more and get something that's going to be fully supported, and in this case is actually better set up for what I plan on doing on it. Alright, so moving on down from that 1650 there, we have, you can see it here, it's one of the few slots on the back that is not black. You can see these are a little bit, like, I call them like kind of military green tinge. I did repaint them to try and match the case, but the paint I had, which was Rust-Oleum Automotive Matte Black, for whatever reason, though texture-wise matches powder coat, this black powder coat well, it has a little bit of like a military green or gray tinge to it. This card here is the new 10 gig NIC. The reason why it's not painted is because it's brand new, still within warranty. Also haven't added the drill outs and the tappings. This is an older case design. So if you see these little holes here, and you can look at some older PCI cards, they'll actually have a hole there because it's supposed to have a screw or a peg or something like that, that actually would hold up this side of the card. And if I have another USB device somewhere around here, one second. Now, here's a Razer USB extension from like their tablet. It's basically just that much of an extension. I buy these weird little adapters from companies when I see them pop up because they just come in handy. What we're going to use this to show you though is this USB 2.0 header would normally be pretty wobbly because it'd be connected and held just by that screw down there. But because on this case with its older design, they have these screw holes here, and I've actually drilled and tapped the part right there, which here, got you guys an example. So here's how it looks with a PCI bracket right there. So what you can do is drill out this and tap it. I do it to a 632. You could also do it to an M3. And that way it's not just held in over here, but on the older cases you have the holes where you can hold it up over here. This is just happens to be an extra one where I had until I bought that 10 gig Ethernet. But that's why the 10 gig is not painted or drilled and tapped. You do want, at least with this case's design, as well as the 350D, you got to get some really short 1/8 inch screws. You could also do M3 and get them a little bit shorter, but look at how solid that is. Doesn't move. If you did this without that screw there, like I have upstairs or in other systems, the whole thing is kind of loosey-goosey and you got to be careful when you plug it in. So I would usually normally use these up first, or for cables that stay plugged in, and then go up here for ones I plug and unplug a lot. But now with that second screw there, which they really should retain on newer ones, it's rock solid. Then I did order custom black M3 screws since I did repaint that bracket, just to make it, you know, like black out. Eventually this will, once it's out of warranty, get painted to match. I'm huge on modifying, but I'm not huge on voiding warranties. So here's kind of like my little box of these little adapters. PS2, USB Type C to A, A to C, micro B, all that sort of stuff, micro HDMI. And like that little Razer extension, super duper duper useful when you do need it, and they're like a couple bucks. And I'm not gonna go out of my way to buy it, but if I have to buy something like from Razer, I had to buy a replacement something for like mouse feet or something like that. Or they had exclusive mouse pads in their store at one point. And I just like browsed, like just sometimes go on a Razer or some of the other companies like that and look through their accessories. That's how I found the new front panel for this, was just browsing the case replacement parts since I needed a replacement part, and then it turned out they had a Type C one. Just if you have a little bit extra time, just browse through, and sometimes you'll find some cool stuff like that that'll get you out of some bind in the future, and it's not too hard to toss on there since you're already paying shipping. So this is specifically a QNAP 10 gig controller using the Aquantia chip. Aquantia has since been bought out by, I believe, Marvell. So they don't actually, Aquantia for a while they were selling their own network adapters, like physical cards. They no longer do that, but this QNAP is the closest you get now, and it even gets firmware updates direct from Marvell, unlike the red Asus adapters or their 10G Arions that come with their motherboards from Asus. Those do not. They're in a little bit older of a chipset. This is also the cheapest one, and comes with a bunch of different, comes with a half height adapter, comes with a full height adapter, comes with a NAS adapter. It is natively supported by QNAP's NASs as well as some other ones. So, and it's cheaper. It's like $80 to $90 in that range, whereas most other brands with that exact same chip and the firmware compatibility directly from Aquantia / Marvell, which they did just update. So if you have one of these Marvell or the Aquantia controllers, even if it's not one like it's an Asus one like most of mine are, the newest driver finally just got updated end of July of 2020 here. Big update. So go and grab that. you're likely to see better performance, better stability, all that sort of stuff. It's been, since Marvell acquired them, there has not been a driver update. I think they might have been waiting for Computex or something to announce a new product. That hasn't happened, but they finally dropped, like I said, actually new firmware for this QNAP as well as a number of others, as well as a new driver that applies to all of them. The last card down here is this, I don't know if you see, it's AlphaCool HDX2. I actually had to import these directly to the US. Mod My Mods, if I recall, helped me out with that because they were constantly out. What that is that's a PCI Express 3.0 by 4 adapter, but it's also a heatsink. Now this is available in a 2-drive config as well. And you're like, wait, how are you using an NVMe drive in, once again, Sabertooth X79? So it turns out that anything that is UEFI and Intel, you can more than likely add an NVMe drive. You can kind of see it in there, even though you don't have a slot. So anything for sure, 3rd gen or newer, can be added. 4th gen, which would be Haswell, actually had it on a number of systems, so it's super easy to add 4th gen and newer. And it turns out that 2nd gen X79, there are only 3 boards. There was the Deluxe X79-Deluxe, which Squares had bought off me a long time ago, and I bought back off of him for the home theater PC. Then there was the Rampage 4 Black Edition, also from Asus, and then the X79 Dark from EVGA. All 3 probably the best boards available in X79 by far, because they got to fix all of the issues that the original ones had. Like, I don't know if you guys knew this, but when X79 launched, though it had PCI Express 3.0 compatibility, it did not have PCI Express 3.0 support. So on boards like this one, this Sabertooth X79, I actually have to run a utility from NVIDIA to have this this or really any other graphics card show up as PCI Express 3.0. And that has been since this launched, because it wasn't certified PCI Express 3.0, only 2.0. So there's a little batch utility, command line batch utility that you can find probably still. I originally got it from Tom's Hardware way back in the day and have just kept it. That makes this actually show up as a 3.0 card rather than a 2.0. About getting cut off there, but besides this RX02 overheating, it also eats batteries. So I'm already through my 2nd battery. I'm going to have to buy some more. I'm used to on the GoPro eating batteries as well. I think I had 4 or 6 for the dang thing, if you're actually doing continuous recording or time lapses or anything like that. I do believe on this I can do external power, so I might have to look into that. But yeah, so what I was getting to is I went off on a little bit of tangent. Basically, on 1st gen X79, like that, you gotta, if you want PCI Express 3.0 on NVIDIA, there's gonna be a command line utility that you run in order to make that actually happen. That may have been fixed since like later versions of Windows 10, because this was back with Windows 7 and 8, especially 8. But we'll see if that's needed. I do still have it if I need it. 2nd gen X79 boards like the X79-Deluxe and the Rampage 4 Black Edition and the X79 Dark do not require that, as they are properly certified. If you're wondering why I say Dash in the Deluxe, is because Asus made a 1st gen board that is Deluxe X79, which is totally not confusing at all to have 2 completely different boards named basically the exact same thing. So I call it the X79 Deluxe Dash Edition. You'll hear Squares and I joking about that from time to time. What that also means, though, is because 2nd gen, that Deluxe board actually did ship with a PCI Express NVMe adapter. So that points to, wait, if 2nd gen supports it, why can't the 1st gen X79 boards? And they can. See, it's in there. How you test this on any of the It's really finicky to get it to work on a second gen CPU, like a 2600, 2500, or a 2700. Third gen, most third gen boards, that would be Z77, did get updates to UEFI. First gen X79 also did not ship with UEFI support. So your board, I have an Intel one. So one of the last gens that Intel made motherboards was X79. They stopped making motherboards by the time that the second gen CPUs for X79 came out, and everybody did the update to UEFI. So those never got updated to UEFI. Those will not have or not be able to add NVMe support. But pertaining, you have a board that has gotten updated to UEFI, you can pop one of these drives in there and see if when you install Windows, it shows up as being available. If it does, and you can install Windows to it, you can get this to work. And what will happen though after you install Windows is you will not be able to boot to it. But that will show that your board is compatible with PCI Express boot devices, and sees this drive, just not as bootable. If that does work, that means we can modify your UEFI super easy on these Asus boards because they have BIOS flashback to have NVMe boot support. If you guys need help with that, I will try to link it in the description. Otherwise, reach out to me. But I have gone all the way back to Sandy Bridge on, you can do it on the Z68 boards. That was the oldest I did. Gets really finicky with those. But especially 3rd gen, 4th gen and newer for sure. X79 and newer for sure you can add it. Gets a little finicky when you go to 3rd gen with Z77, but I've done it before on 3 separate occasions. And then I've also even done it on a Z68 that had been updated to UEFI with a 2700 in it. So it is possible. It's just the older you get past X79 or it would be Z87 for 4th gen mainstream, it gets less likely to happen. The other thing I will say is you're probably going to want a Samsung drive, and it has to be a 960 EVO or newer, if I recall. Otherwise, it can get a little bit finicky as well. This one, since remember X79 did support NVMe 2nd gen, we don't really have any issues. In here is a Intel 760p, 250 I think, or whatever, that's 256. We're fine here, but especially when you start getting older than 4th gen, you want to make sure you get the Samsung 960 EVO or newer, probably a 970 EVO at this point, or soon to be 980 EVO, at least as of July of 2020, because those actually have their own NVMe drivers, and they have some backwards compatibility built right into them. We have previously tried a 600p Intel on a Z77 board with a 3770K, and we could not get it to work. Dropped in a 960 EVO at the time, bam, worked right away. So Samsung does not advertise this necessarily, but they do have some extra backwards compatibility stuff built in, especially with their own NVMe driver that they put out. Intel does also have their own NVMe driver, but it doesn't have that same stuff built in. Also, why would they purposely build in that sort of stuff for you? You know, they want you to get the newer tech. The last thing in the last slot here is that USB 2.0 header. Highly recommend these. EVGA used to sell them. I don't know if they still do. This is another thing where it was just in their motherboard accessories section on their website. Take a look. I even have a Firewire one from them. Not going to work on this board since it doesn't have a header, but it was working great on the Sabertooth X58, and I've ran those for a long time. Always go back because they obviously sell quality components since it's like for their motherboards and accessories on their website, so it's not some weird like eBay or Amazon seller that you don't know the quality of. They're probably a little bit more money, but well worth it, and I highly recommend you give them a lick of paint and then replace the screws. You know what I mean, like I did here. It makes them look much smarter. Really wish they would ship that way, but I'm just happy that they're black, and that's originally why I went with EVGA, because I have plenty that are gray, Some that are even not even USB 2.0 capable. Like they're just 1.1 from way back in the day. Also, they make the 4-port. And back when I was originally buying these from them, a lot of them only shipped with 2 ports because the amount of headers for USB 2.0 on motherboards was only like 1 header or maybe 2 headers. So you'd use 1 for the front panel and you'd want to add 2 more to the back. Now in this X79 era and X99, you have plenty of USB 2.0 headers. Now, once you hit like, what was it, Z270 on Intel, you're lucky to get 1 USB 2.0 header. And I remember there's been some EVGA boards that had no USB 2.0, which for DACs and amps and troubleshooting, no way. I need to have native USB 2.0 on my motherboards. Even 2 ports, even if I just use it for keyboard and mouse, though some keyboards, like those really high-end gaming ones now, do require 3.0 ports, especially like Corsairs. I do need some of those headers, like that, and some ports on the back. That's a requirement of my systems to this day. One thing on to note too is if you look, these were originally all vented PCI Express slots. I went for solid ones, and I even considered adding some of this sound dampening foam on them. And the reason why I did that is I don't necessarily want air getting through there, especially with this passive power supply here. So I went with the solid ones, painted them in black. Normally they would have been silver. These are from much, much, much older systems. But like I said, this is I have the second solid panel for the 750D as well. And both, back when this was my home theater PC case, were treated with sound dampening. So we're really going for purposely closing this off except where we want air to come in and go out, and then sound dampen those parts. I could have, and I considered putting foam here. I don't have really thin enough foam to do that. It would have definitely impeded using the screwdriver, so I decided not to do that. But a lot of newer cases will have this vented as well, which I don't prefer. If you look at the Define S series versus the Define R5, the S is not vented here, whereas the R5 is. And that's just to save money, because why vent something if you don't have to? Cutting holes in things costs money. Oh, and I did kick out, to make things a bit quieter in here, there's a 40 mil, it might be a 30 mil fan on this one, that goes in right there. It's supposed to cool that rear heatsink. I think it's a 30 mil, not a 40, because if it was a 40, I probably would have replaced it with a Noctua and then been done and used it. But it went out long ago, and I just never replaced it. I've never had an issue with this Sabertooth X79 cooling the rear IO. This was one of the first boards that first had this cover for covering the rear IO. This is kind of back when it started. The Rampage 4 Extreme, not the black, also had that back then, but it was pretty rare. This is also back when Asus first started having those like foil back plates rather than the ones with the little tabs. This is before things were integrated. So having that foil where you didn't have to line up any tabs was super nice, and then the covered rear IO looked way cleaner. Cooling, we got the 2 Noctuas here, or 1 Noctua in the rear. These are A14 fans, 2 in the front. These were left over from Anthrax 7.0, I believe, because it had a mix of, that was in this Nanoxia case that the server's temporarily in. It had a mix of 140 and 120 millimeter fans to get the most rad space. I really do recommend sticking to the same fan size throughout the case as much as possible, and then the same fan. Far easier to control. We do have a little 60 mil. It's an A6 by 25, 60 millimeter. This is the PWM version. Originally I did not have that, but I went with PWM so I could just wire it into the hub back here. I really don't care as long as it's spinning, because the fan speeds are going to be going off of these 140s, so it'll just get a certain percentage and go off of that. That is, if you can't tell, there's no Like generally it goes towards this back frame. Air goes towards that frame. If you notice, the frame's not here. So this is actually pulling air from inside the case, like inside the case here, and spitting it out the front. You might be wondering why I'm doing that. That is because if you notice, the front of this is very, very, very restricted. Normally, the non-wood versions of this actually have holes in the front here, so that's where it would be pulling it from. The other thing is, though, is this is not filtered at all. Whereas the air from inside this case, the way I have this set up, just coming in the front, in this case it's got dual filters, which yes is going to reduce airflow. So you could pull the second one if you have the newer front panel that's vented. If you have the older solid panel, go buy the vented front panel. You'll thank me later. And then if you are worried about airflow, you can pull out the internal filter if you don't want to use it. On Frozen Slate's build, we did end up doing that. It also gives you more clearance in the front of this for fans. And we did have to modify the front of his case because we actually added some really cool RGB from Fantex to it. So you can pull that secondary filter out if you have this ventilated front. If you don't have the ventilated front, it's solid, so it pulls air in from the sides here. Leave that filter in. You can't, it's going to get really kind of messy to have the fans on the outside here, because there's going to be just this little bit of room that's basically these pegs to pull air from. So right now I kind of have the best setup you can. It's on the back of the rad. You have this whole area in front of the rad to pull air from, as well as the entire front. The original design of this case had a solid front panel. It was just pulling air from this gap here, and the fans would have been on the outside. Now that does work, but definitely not the most optimal. So pick up this front panel if you have a 750D, 350D. I don't know if they ever made it for the 900D, because even though the 750, 350, and then later I think it's a 550 or a 450 are based on the 900, the 900 is built completely different. But I do really like these. This whole line of cases, I really wish they still made them. They're just very interchangeable, very modifiable. You can put a ton of different layouts in. That is one thing I think is lacking in a lot of modern cases, is the ability to run, like if you look here with the hard drives, you could have hard drives from, besides like Fractal does a very good job of this, but pretty much nobody else. Maybe people don't want to pay for it, and other people don't want to pay to design it. But you could have, and I have enough cages, because at one point this was my server case as well. And then it was the home theater PC, which is kind of a server as well. But you could have these cages, floor to ceiling here, as well as here. And so that would be 9 drives here, because it's 3 cages. And then you could have that 4th cage there, so that's 12. And if you didn't do your front I/O and had a shorter graphics card, you could get another cage in there as well, if you really wanted to mess around with it. But if you look, there's even the cutouts for this lower cage. So I really like my setup, and I had this in this case before with the X58 Sabertooth, where you got a front rad, and then you have the just single hard drive cage there, which is set back, because that way you can have your rad and pull to have the best clearance out front, have nice amount of clearance behind the fans as well, but then still have your hard drives with cables on the back easily accessible, and then these do easily slide out. One thing about these sleds, which they used in the Air 540 as well, are flimsy as hell. I've broken so many of them just because it's really, really cheap plastic. They should have really used metal, in my opinion. That is one thing that Fractal does, and I really, generally do like Fractal cases probably more than especially newer Corsair cases. But I think that this line, the 750D, when I saw it, just impressed me, and so that's why I ended up getting one and putting a build in it. And the 350D, back when Preston or Frozen Slate did his 4th gen Haswell build, fit his needs perfectly. It was even sub $100, like $80 for that one, with a side panel. And that was back when like the not edge-to-edge side panel because they didn't have tempered glass, but they were one of the first ones to have a basically full side panel window. Prior to that, nobody had done it. And so yeah, this was like this line of cases was groundbreaking. I really think they could have just updated them with a full glass side panel, taken out the 5 1/4 inch bays, made it floor to ceiling rads. By the way, this back here does also fit. If you've seen some newer cases that have fans that pull air in from the side, that is actually spaced for 120 millimeter fans because 3.5 inch hard drives are about that same size. So being like, if you cut a hole in that back panel or got a back panel with a hole cut in it, you could be all fancy like those newer cases and pull air in this way if you wanted to. So this was like, whoever designed this case at Corsair, like they were forward thinking for sure. And this could definitely be updated fairly easily to match the newer trends. My guess, they didn't want to do that because it wasn't as RGB-ified, and they wanted like a new face because it's kind of hard to sell the same case over and over and over, even though NZXT seems to have been able to do that with the S340. As nice of a case as that is, there is one way to build in that well, or two. Like one way to build in it well with an air cooler, which in my opinion doesn't look great and doesn't work great, and then one way to build in it with a front-mounted all-in-one cooler. And then the newer version of the S340 is the H500, which in a way too, it has a little bit even worse airflow. But this is kind of where all that stuff started out, and then went to NZXT. So, but yeah, this could easily be adapted to a lot of the modern trends, I feel. Since it already had a very wide open side panel, it could easily be converted. Like I could even convert it to tempered glass if I wanted. However, I'm going for silence, which is why it's nice that Corsair lets you just buy another solid side panel and slap it on there. And then I added my own sound dampening. Super nice and convenient. That's why I really like these cases that if you really look at them and watch reviews and stuff, you can tell that certain cases throughout the years are just designed well. And this one and the 350D are ones that I would say are in that category, along with like the Define R5, highly versatile. Just saw one thing that is not done prettily, but I had to fit in the hotspot. And being an older style case, it actually has rails for the drives to sit on. You can see the optical drive doing that here. Had to bend that out to fit in that hotspot. I could have cut it off too, I guess, but that was done a long time ago. Alright, so yeah, besides those A14s that are all wired up via PWM, X79 really only has one PWM header. That's the CPU one. Also CPU option, but they're the same header. It's basically just like a built-in splitter. You do see chassis fan 1 that has a 4-pin. It's not actually PWM controllable. ASUS used to pull this shit, and I used to give them crap about it all the freaking time. They would say, we have 4-pin fan headers. Yeah, they do. You just can't control them via PWM. Super, super freaking annoying. So I don't even know why they made them 4-pin. Just to say they had 4-pin. Marketing BS, if you ask me. And then we have the EVGA CLC 280. I got that for doing, crap. What build? It was a build for somebody from work. Lots of RGB in it. We made a custom front panel. Northern Lights, maybe? I think it was called, or something like that. I'll try to remember by the time I do this video, but at some point I will have pictures up for that. They are taken, just not fully edited. And we did a whole live stream with it, so maybe some of you guys were around. Comment below with which build that was. But that's where I got this cooler, because he had in his case, it took either a 240 or a 360 rad, not a 280. And the Corsair fans he had bought, the light loops, were 120 mil, not 140 mil. So as part of the deal for like kind of doing him, he was originally going to pay me, but I took that cooler off his hands, as well as just some extra like accessories and parts and stuff. Worked out for me. I also got to teach another guy some tips and tricks on building PCs. I mostly did it, but then kind of walked him through the whole process. So hopefully next time, or if he has to do upgrades, he can do it himself. But that's how I got that cooler. EVGA really needs to tone down the freaking block on there. But otherwise, love the EVGA cooler because it doesn't have any of that, just like the older Corsair coolers. No USB nonsense. None. No USB nonsense. It's just power, fan control, going to a fan header, and then, pump. And the fans it comes with, in my opinion, are shite, but it's cheaper. So, especially because I don't want to control it, I just want it to run, and I'm going to use my own fans. Perfect. Love them. Keep it up with the EVGA ones. The Fractal ones are also good in that same regard. We just have it running back to this fan hub back here, which I'll get into a bit more later. But that controls the fans, as well as the 60 mil. Not optimal really, but it works. And then it's also just set to power the pump. And then back here I just have tied up the 2 fan headers, because all these CLC companies want you to control the fans on the CLC, or all-in-one cooler. CLC stands for closed liquid cooler, via the cooler itself. I have a motherboard that does that. I don't know why I'd ever want to do that, especially with Asus, even back in X79 era. Great fan control. But that's really it for the cooling. Those 2 Noctuas, or those 3 Noctuas there, and the 160 mil for the hot swap bay, reversed. Normally it would be pulling in through the front. And then the EVGA CLC 280 there, which in my opinion is a good one. If I recall, it's just standard Ace Tech, fit right down there with the correct bracket on X79, where you don't need a backplate. Easy install, good tubing length for front mount. As a heads up, a lot of times Gamers Nexus says you actually want tubes on the bottom for pump, extended pump life. I don't know how you're supposed to do that with a front mount rad on like a case like this. You just don't have the length. So, I mean, these are warranted for 5 years. A lot of these brands even show them being installed this way. It should last this way for 5 years. But, I mean, if you can, like say if the 5 1/4 inch bays weren't here and you can flip it the other way and you have enough tubing length, go for it. But I do like this setup on a system that's not as high end here, where it's 2 in the front, 1 out the back. Otherwise, if you had a bit higher end components, you could do like we did in the 350D, 2 in the front, 2 out the top, and 1 in the back. I like having that positive pressure. So more fans going in than out, especially when you have the same the same exact fans. So that would be my setup in this case, is either 2 in the front, 2 out the top, and 1 in the back, or like I have it here, 2 in the front, 1 out the back. That does change a bit if you're using air cooling. I might do an intake on the top, an outtake on the top, and outtake in the back. So it's still 3 in, 2 out, and then it'll just basically go in the top, out the back, top, or back, and then in the front, out the back. That is how my home theater PC is set up, as well as Squeers' desktop. Just because they have tower coolers in them. Otherwise, the 2 in the front, 1 out the back is just classic setup. In this case, because the rad as well, it'll be a little bit more restricted. So it'll balance out even more than just, it's not 2 to 1. Let's call it 1.5 to 1, I guess. Last 2 things to kind of show you off on this side here. This is a Seasonic Platinum PSU here, fanless. I think this is like a 520 or a 450. Really nice. This was originally in Chibi PC. Then it turned out Chibi PC really needed a fanned version of this, and I think it went to a 650 because the fan is actually being used as an exhaust on that ITX rig. Highly recommend utilizing that. So if you're building an ITX rig, don't turn off don't turn on the silent fan mode, or choose to turn off the silent fan mode on an ITX rig. That's a proper, like GPC fits within this area here, essentially. That way you can use it as an exhaust. helps with cooling. And then it eventually got pulled from the home theater PC, where the quiet operation is appreciated, but it just wasn't enough wattage. We were getting far too close. Now the passive cooled ones are overrated. Like usually this is like minimum, if it's a 520, it's probably a 650 or a 750 at a minimum, maybe even an 850, just so it can run, you know, without a fan, without overheating. On there are these nice white, I don't know if you see these here, I think they turned out pretty good. I didn't have too many selections at the time, because this is like kind of right as COVID was starting, with Corona Chan wrecking up China here. And these are the CableMod Pro cables. So they're the thicker ones, they bend a bit nicer than the thin normal CableMod ones. And in this case, because this is just like a secondary system for my repairing, I didn't want to spend the money on buying like a full custom set. And this set, since getting them from CableMod at the time was very hard, these are just off Amazon. Amazon happened to have stock, and if you look at the cable management there, I think it turned out pretty darn good. And then the white, it's pretty neutral with the black case, and then the little hints of Noctua here and there, and then the wood grain on the front. So it's pretty neutral. Let me know what other colors you guys would have gone with. I didn't have too much of a selection going through Amazon. CableMod themselves has a ton, especially if you want to go custom. I've had very good luck with them, and that's coming from somebody who did do their own power supply for my main desktop, Anthrax. Custom sleeved it Noctua colors. Pain in the ass. Turned out well. I'll be using those power supplies. Now with them changing the spec now, you know, they announced the 12-pin NVIDIA connector instead of that 6 or 8-pin. And then Intel is going with that all 12-volt spec now. My desktop, any brand new computers I'm going to build are probably going to need new power supplies. Which kind of sucks, since power supplies do last a long time generally, and I have quite nice ones. So, but you got to do what you got to do, you know what I mean? And it is bringing tech forward for the first time in a while when it comes to power. This system obviously won't need a new power supply anytime soon, but my next desktop, personal like main system, probably will. And I don't know if I'm going to sleeve my own cables then. I'll probably have to pay somebody else. Just time is a big thing there. Maybe by then, I know CableMod does have brown cables now. Maybe they'll come with tan, so I can, or we'll just go with brown, because I'm, you know, really don't want to do that again. I think Paul's Hardware said the same thing. Here we have WD Purples. These are their surveillance drives. Highly recommend the surveillance drives, whether it's Western Digital or Seagate. Those are generally not SCMR drives, the shingled magnetic recording drives, so much faster random speeds. Also, the surveillance drives are still designed for 24/7 operation, like to be on 24/7 and generally to be written to that entire time. These happen to just be purples because they had some in stock at Best Buy when I was doing this build. And I could price match Amazon. They were a decent price. These also, the surveillance drives also had a larger cache on them with 64 meg versus, you know, whatever was on the blues. Gotta remember, WD greens became blues now, which are garbage. A lot of times the surveillance drives will also be 7200 RPM versus other drives like reds, or blues or greens are equivalent, being 54 or 5900 RPM. So you get the little bit longer warranty on the surveillance drives. Then there are also always buy drives rated for 24/7 operation, in my opinion. So yeah, I tend to go with surveillance drives. The other thing to think of, I've recommended to streamers before, and they're like, why? And I'm like, well, you know, surveillance is basically just recording video. What are you doing while you're streaming or making YouTube videos? Recording video. So same sort of operations there. And they're optimized for, like, you know, actually having a lot of data streamed to and from them at all times. Alright, so I know I've been going on for a while here, and this thing saves some pretty fat files. since it doesn't look like it uses H.265 or HEVC like the GoPro. Hopefully we don't run into the same issue like we have with the GoPro, where it shoots variable frame rate footage on the RX02, because that was a pain in the butt to deal with the GoPro. One of the last things I forgot to show you guys on the back of the DryBones build here is if you see the gold screws. I thought those kind of went well with the Noctua fans and the wood grain. These, I can link them. You can get them on Amazon, or CableMod used to sell them. They're just 630 through 632 threaded thumb screws. You could also use them on the PCI Express slots. The one downside is these are, well, not downside that they're aluminum, but they are aluminum, but they have no screw cutout in the top. Getting them off Amazon, there was one brand that I've had a ton of really good luck with. They didn't have, they were out of gold when I needed more of these. I think it was gold, or it might have been on for the HTPC as well. But I ordered a second set from a different brand that I thought was similar, and the knurling was way worse. The CableMod ones are obviously very, very nice, but they're sometimes hard to get a hold of. And I'll look up this exact brand. But there is one that I've found. You can kind of tell in the pictures on Amazon. Like, some of them, they just look cheaper. Like, the pictures are worse quality, and the knurling almost looks flat. And kind of show you on this one that I just put back in for the side panel here. But if you look, this is actually rolled in to there, whereas the cheap ones literally have just lines cut in them. Like, it's not actually like a knurl. So how this would work is they actually take this and they roll it in a die. It gets rolled in a die and just gets pressed in. That might happen with the other ones as well, but it looks like there's just lines in them rather than this is actually like a diamond, you know, like it's raised up. The cheap ones look very, very similar. And like the gold's not as bright on them. It's more of like a dingy gold, so they're like anodized worse. But yeah, I actually returned that second set to Amazon. And just decided not to do all the PCI Express slots in there. I think it would have looked way better. Also, without the screw holes in them, they're a pain in the butt to deal with on the inside. What somebody really needs to do is make those exact ones just with screw holes in them. And they're going with aluminum because it's nice and easy to anodize. The other thing that I would probably prefer personally would be go steel and powder coat them. Just more durable, better. Then you could have a lot more colors too. So, backside, I'll let you guys get a good look at this. Oh, yeah, we filled up a card. 64 gigs down the tube, boys. Woo woo! But there you go. That is what my cable management on the back looks like. I'm going to say this is pretty clean. There are some overlapping cables. But SATA cables you kind of got to keep clean. You know, but for the most part, if you guys are wondering, if you're doing cable management, it's your first or second time, what you want to do is, I like staying to the outer. So stay to the bottom, side, top. In this case, there's the bunch of screw holes in the middle right there, since I'm not using the adapters for the SSDs, for the vertical mount SSDs, or horizontal mount SSDs. So I have a whole bunch of cables grouped up here, and they go up to there, and then there's your fan controller, and then down the side here. Keep them out of the middle, because a lot of times the easiest way to do stuff is just chuck it in the middle, and then it gets very bulky. That's why you'll see a lot of times, a lot of people think my cable management might not look all that clean. But what I'm trying to do is, because I usually have a lot of stuff in my cases, is keep it very flat. So that you can, like, there's no problem getting this side panel on. So sometimes you might have been able to make this look cleaner by, like, grouping this up here or smooshing all this together, but then it just makes a bigger clump. Now, I personally wouldn't run every cable separately. That tends to get really, you know what I mean? But I, group the fans up top here and the CPU cooler down to the hub. To me, this seems pretty darn clean, and a nice place to hide stuff. A lot of times is either down behind the power supply here, or behind the 5 1/4 inch base. Like if you see, I got this loop here. That's the Type C cable for the USB 3.0. And then I have the actual USB 3.0 cables just stuck above the optical drive. Since it's not being used in this build and won't be unless the motherboard gets swapped. In that case, a lot's going to get pulled out. I can get access to it. So if you look, the fans are pretty clean here. We have this is the Silverstone hub. It's an 8-port PWM. This one that is sectioned off here. Oh, there's a Hamlet, guys. Hey, Hamlet. How are you, buddy? Pretty good? Okay. Yeah. You probably heard me talking. I want some pets. How many pets do you want, Hamlet? Huh? I will say the angle, or I think it's supposed to be a 24mm equivalent on this RX 02. Not as wide, for sure. But it is an f4. It's just, this is closer to a camera than a GoPro, I would say. Just a camera in the size of a GoPro. Uses the same sensor, I believe, as their point and shoots. So it's got a little bit, you're not going to have that fisheye look that you might get on a GoPro. So yeah, when we have the 8-port, you got to make sure you have one of your main fans. In this case, this is like one of the 140s, plugged into this one that's boxed off, because this is the one that sends the RPM to the motherboard to figure out like what speeds the fans are going, because you only want to report one of those fans. Like if you ever use a fan splitter, even if it's a 3-pin, and both fans have 3 cables hooked up, you got to clip one of the tachometer cables. You're going to confuse the motherboard. With fan splitters, it should only be one of the 2 fans reporting tach. And then if you split tachometer to tach, or if you use double splitters, like 2 to 2 more, or 1 to 2 more, so you have 4 fans. You really got to make sure that the fan you want the tachometer to go through is actually not on, is actually plugged into one of the one that's being passed through. It gets a little confusing there. Noctua's splitters are correct, but a lot of like the cheap ones on Amazon, I've just found that like they just put all 4 or all 3 wires in, and you need to manually clip one to not cause issues. The other nice thing about using a hub like this is it does split off power. So power is going right down here and then plugs into this capacitated splitter right there. That way you know for sure you're getting power right off your power supply. You're not having to have one header on your motherboard power 8 fans or something. It's far better just to pull 12 volts straight from the power supply. This is also a way to make sure the motherboard is using PWM, because if it's not powering it via the motherboard, it can't do voltage control. So this is back in the day, back when you only had one PWM header, and that's how I actually originally found out Asus was doing this BS where they would have a 4-pin header, but it wouldn't be PWM. Is I would plug stuff in that was powered off the power supply via an adapter I made, because these hubs didn't exist yet, or you would have splitters that went Molex and then the TAC and the PWM. Those were not all that common, but I had some from some coolers and stuff like that, or I made up some of my own. You would find out that's how I found out that some of these 4-pin headers weren't actually PWM. So that's a way to force it into PWM mode, because it can't voltage control it. Oh, no, I pet him a little bit. He wants a bunch of attention. He's rubbing against me. Hamlet's the kind of cat where if you don't give him attention, he's going to take it. Let's get him some catnip. Alright. I don't like giving him catnip all the time, because I feel like it, less, if he has it all the time, there's less of a reaction to it. Also, he doesn't need to be high all the time. Come here, Hammett. You want this? Here you go. If you've never given your cat catnip before, Highly recommended. Just don't leave it out anymore, because otherwise you just be sleeping on it all the time. Is that pretty good, Hammett? Oh yeah. Yeah. He's like, why are you disturbing me? Yeah, there's a catnip banana that Ryan from Level 1 Techs linked, and highly recommended to get your cat a catnip banana. He goes even more crazy for it than that one. But what we got here then is, so we have these two fans. Luckily, where I placed this, I was able to get this perfectly placed where the two front fans don't need an extension. And Noctua fans in general have rather short cables because they expect you to extend it over to like a fan controller or something like that. So they have shorter cables, and the RGB ones, not RGB, sorry, the Chromax ones that you can put the colored corners on actually only have little things right on the end of the fan because they expect you to use an extension and then use colored cables or, you know, whatever you want to do to extend it where you want to. But this ended up being the perfect length to just go straight up to this fan controller. One of those two is what's reporting the tachometer. Then back here we have the rear fan that goes to an extension and then goes in right there. You can get sleeved black extensions. They still have colored wires, but they're sleeved black. It's like $5 for a couple dollars on Amazon. So unless you need really long ones, and like one or two, so in some of these cases I've plugged in an extension into another extension to make it the rest of the way. But unless you need more than like that distance, then I'd say go to performance PCs and you can get the ones with the black wires. And I've gotten those like up to 4 feet. And in cases like this Deep Silence 6 from Nanoxia or my Case Labs case, a lot of times you do need extensions that long, but you're also spending a lot more on that build. Whereas your average person, I think I put him in the other room. Give me 1 second here. Let's make a little trip. Do. Get some light for you guys. Here's my big wall of computer stuff. That's just cables, stuff like that. And in here, we have right here from Amazon 10 pieces, 4-pin PWM. They're just sleeved. I think they're like 8-inch. They're not even foot. You can get the 8-inch ones cheaper than the foot ones, like much cheaper, like a 10-pack rather than a 4-pack or a 5-pack. And in a lot of cases, 8 inches is enough, or a foot isn't long enough. So just combine two because they're so cheap. Yeah, a lot of that stuff that not on that wall, but in that bookshelf there is probably going to go behind the set here because that's all like extra cables you're going to need for a build. But yeah, I'll link those below too because they're just really cheap, really handy. That way you guys can route your fans nice and cleanly. And I highly recommend if you get the same fans, even the old 300 Antec 300 down there has all those white SwiftTech Helix fans in it. Run that all to a hub. Pick up either the Silverstone hub, which I do tend to prefer now because the ports come out the side. It does take up more room like horizontally like this way. But in this build, like the SwiftTech one where you plug it into the top, you don't have enough room this way in order to fit it because it's the hub plus a plug going that way. Now in a bigger case like the Deep Silence 6 or like Square says the Air 540, that's plenty of room in there. And a lot of times you might actually be able to get better. We could take a look, see how all these cables like stick out down here. You won't get that with the SwiftTech because you can go straight on the top of it. But both of those, I'd probably go with the Silverstone for your average case. Just put a little piece of 3M tape behind it and it is adhered, never going to move. Right coming through here is that 60 mil Noctua plugs in. Normally I would never recommend, because it is a different fan size and speed, and it spins much faster and it's much smaller than those 140s. However, the this Sabertooth X79 has one PWM, like true PWM header. So I'd rather have some control to it than it just going like mad all the time. And it keeps it clean because it just goes here straight in there. We are also using this to power the pump, the EVGA CLC 280 pump, because I just run it at full speed generally with all-in-ones. There's no point in, you could actually, if it gets a little loud, if you have those like inline fan reducers, they come a lot of times with Noctuas. I think I got some right over here. Yeah, there's some right in there if you see them. So for the all-in-one coolers, if you want to run them a little quieter, and I might do that in this case, it depends on, you know, like once I actually get it up and running, you can just reduce the voltage. Since they aren't PWM controlled, they're just voltage controlled for the most part, and they'll just run slower all the time, because in most cases pump speed has almost no correlation to performance of the all-in-one. Just as long as it has enough pump speed to go around, like circulate the fluid, you're going to be fine. So you can reduce the noise by running it at a lower voltage by using one of those adapters if you have a fan power. In this case, since this just gets 12 volt from the power supply and is trying to control via PWM, and that all-in-one is not PWM, it's just setting at 12 volt. Now if I decide that's too loud, I can trace back which one of these it is, because I don't remember off the top of my head, and then pop on one of those voltage adapters, and those will drop the voltage by a certain amount based on the resistance. The only thing you have to do is generally the pumps pull more amperage than a fan would. So you gotta make sure you get one, like if you feel it and it starts feeling hot, the resistor is probably being overworked. Like I have some bigger ones from some more powerful like thermal take fans that I'll usually use for that. Like they have a much physically larger resistor on it. Or remember, those extensions are super cheap. If you want to make your own, you can get a resistor, like buy larger resistors and chop those apart, and then put your own inline through-hole resistor in there. Put some heat shrink over it, slide the sleeving back over it, and you can get the exact reduction that you want. Like that's just a resistor in line with the 12 volt rail to knock it down to say 9 volt, 7 volt, as low as 5 volt. Some older Silverstone fans before, like just as PWM Noctuas were coming on the scene and making a big splash, Silverstone was starting to get their fans to actually even have startup voltages of 5 volts. Fans back in the day used to be able to go down to 5 volts, but they would still have to start up at 12, so you would actually, that's why a lot of computers, when they start their fans, 12 volt really loud. That's because back with voltage control, they could not start their fan at 5 volt, like very quiet. So you would start it at 12 volt and then ramp it down slowly. Because you could run them at 5 volts, potentially, or 7 volts or whatever, but they might not be able to start at that speed. Silverstone towards them with their air penetrator, I think it was a AP123 with the blue fins. Love those fans. If you had a board that was still not PWM, and those could start all the way down at 5 volt. So very good fans. Not really concerned anymore though, because I recommend PWM everything, and most case companies are too cheap to ship PWM fans. So what I was saying before the RX-0 Mark II overheated again was that if you're spending, you know, probably maybe not $1,000, but $1,200 more on a build, that you have definitely enough room to get some proper fans. Whether it be like Be Quiet, or like sometimes you get a cooler and it has decent fans on it, like an all-in-one cooler, and you just have to buy some more of those. But most case fans that ship with, like say your $100 case, even up to $150, are junk. Get them out of there. I really almost wish like they'd start pulling things like Lian Li and just not shipping fans with them. I mean, I know like most first-time builders aren't going to know that they need fans and all that sort of stuff, but if you're at the $150+ price range on a case, I think it's pretty safe to assume that you're going to buy some fans yourself. And I think we're starting to see some more products later into 2020 here that are starting to adopt that. And back in the day, like in the Antec 900 and 300 era, it was not that uncommon to have tower coolers, even before then, that like you just buy the cooler, and they knew you'd either have fans or you'd want to buy your own fans, so it'd just be the tower itself. That was not uncommon. Or say with that Antec 300, you could get it without fans, or you could get the Antec 300, like a specific version. I don't remember the name off the top of my head. I've said it before in streams with Squeers, because that was his case, and I've used 300 many times. But it shipped with 100% filled except the side panel, with fans. So if you're going to buy it that way. Unless you're planning on replacing them, then save the money and buy it with no fans. And the price difference was like $20 or something. So, I mean, if you don't need them though, why get the case full of fans? But yeah, I really like how just do PWM, buy these cheap extensions off Amazon, unless you need longer ones if you have a giant case or something. These capacitated SATA powers definitely clean stuff up, along with the like the PWM hub. Same thing, the bend on this 24 pin is nowhere near as bad as it would have to be, thanks to that right angle 24 pin adapter. I have done a separate video on that since Cooler Master sent me my original one, and I've bought 3 or 4 since then, and bought them for other people's builds as well. It's just a great product, and I wouldn't recommend it in your budget $600 build, or like I did for my grandparents. It was like $450 when I had their build done, because that's like a $10-15 adapter. But especially if you're in a $1,200 plus range, or maybe $1,000 depending on what your budget is, and or if you're updating a computer, like in Preston's case, Frozen Slate, he kept his case, kept his power supply. It was just CPU. It was a CPU, motherboard, RAM. Then I'll eventually update the GPU once there's once the 3000 NVIDIA series comes out. Same thing with his NVMe drive, as it wasn't a 4.0, even though he went to X570. But the drive he wanted, the Samsung 980 Pro, wasn't out yet. So if you build a nice computer, or even if you build your initial computer that isn't all that nice with room for upgrades, you don't necessarily have to rebuild it every time you want a new computer. You can just say upgrade GPU if your CPU is good enough, or just drop in a CPU if you bought a motherboard capable enough. And as you can see, this is X79. I'm trying to remember when this came out. I'm thinking 2011? No, can't be that, because 2010 would have been first gen. Maybe 2013, 2014, because 4th gen was 2014. So we're looking at 6 years here, at least. And realistically, this is still a fully capable system. You might not be able to drop a 2080 Ti in here, but with a 1650, I mean, you got 6 cores, 12 threads still. 16 gigs of RAM. You could easily have 64 gigs in here, because I have 32 in the home theater PC. Plenty of I/O. With like me modding the BIOS on here, we have NVMe access. Think about it, we have 40 PCIe lanes. So this board isn't necessarily the best for splitting those PCIe lanes off. The X79-Deluxe is much better at doing that, with more slots. But like, these are fully viable still. Now I wouldn't go out and like buy one, but if you can get one used off a friend or something for a decent price, why not? But I would say that these are kind of on their last legs as main systems. That's why both Squeers, and if you saw Nathan or Waluigi del Azul, both of them had X79 systems as their personal main rigs, and have both since gone to Ryzen 3rd gen. So that's kind of what I've been doing a lot for people lately, is a bit of Ryzen 2nd gen, but especially when Ryzen 3rd gen dropped with the 12 and 16 core CPUs, a lot of people on high-end desktop X79 systems were willing to drop down. We saw that back with Sandy Bridge from Intel, where people running first gen i7, like 920s and 970s, were willing, especially the 920, maybe not the 970, because that's a 6 core, but especially people in the 920s were willing to go to Sandy Bridge, and Ivy Bridge and Haswell, because they still had their 4 cores, but those systems were way more overclockable, way more up to date, because Intel's high-end desktop always lagged behind when it came to I/O. But this system does show that part of the reason why I like those high-end desktop systems is because of all their PCI Express lanes, which you didn't get in the mainstream systems at the time. You can adapt this with 10 gig Ethernet, with NVMe, modern graphics card, decent amount of RAM, etc. So that's kind of why I did a video on this for you guys, is because the actual hardware isn't new and I didn't really spend any money on it. I could spend a little bit, and it wasn't all that much, to really update the rest of the build to kind of be up to date with, or as up to date as it can be with everything else, and have all the modern creature comforts, nice cable management, especially because this being a troubleshooting system. I pop graphics cards in and all the time, drives in and all the time, just for troubleshooting. That's why this exists. So better compatibility with modern hardware, the better. The previous system, X58 Sabertooth, was great because it supported XP to Windows 10. So hopefully I can get that at least still working if I need any like Windows 7 and older stuff. But I know this was probably a quite long video. Hopefully for some of you that are more into the PC building and modding stuff, this kind of gives you a nice overview of some of the stuff you might have seen us do on stream, and gave you some ideas for your build, or what you can do to keep yours, like up to date and, still rocking that system. I mean, this is something I've done with my systems since my original, X58 system, and then going back to Core 2 Quad and Core 2 Duo. Think about it. I only retired, it's right up here actually. Here it is, my X58 Sabertooth, and this is a 760, which is the newest card still supported by Windows XP from NVIDIA, at least. This is also the last card that had both BIOS and UEFI support, last generation from NVIDIA that had both BIOS support and UEFI support. My 750 Ti actually, which was essentially a 900 series card, being first gen Maxwell. Once you flash that to fix the fan, it was only UEFI. So this is why it's in here, because this is a BIOS board, and I could also take this and pop it in any modern system, being that it's also UEFI compatible. As you can see here, though, we're down to 2 sticks of RAM when it's a triple system. We'll see what we can do to get this thing up and running, but 2010 we're talking about here, so this system lasted me a good 10 years. Maybe 9. I'm trying to think here, but there was 3 years of 24/7 video encoding as my main system, and gaming and that sort of stuff, before it got knocked down to home theater PC and server usage, and then later on served at least 3 years as the repair PC. And almost 2 of those years were done with only 2 RAM slots working. So this thing's had a hard life. Originally running a i7-920 in at 4 gigahertz for those 3 years straight. But what replaced that was what you guys saw over here, X79 or Sabertooth X79 system with a 3930K. Alright guys, well, let me know what you thought about this probably extremely long video. Hopefully it was helpful. This is going to be a very nice system for down in the basement here, for doing PC repair, data backups, troubleshooting, light streaming. We could probably hook it up in the cameras in the room to run the stream. It's always nice to have a proper desktop for that, and you gotta remember, even though this is as old as it is, it's still 6 core, 12 thread. Decent chunk of RAM, fully capable GPU and storage and that sort of stuff. So this is not by any means a bad system. Plenty for what I'm going to use it for, and that way we didn't have to buy any new hardware. There were a couple things, but I kind of went over why those pieces were chosen, either to update it to some modern standards, or because older used hardware, buying that just wasn't viable. So If you have any comments, toss it down below. And as always, you can find me as @TheProfosist on pretty much every social media. I'm most active on Twitter. And the channel is Tech Exchange The. It's the-tech-exchange.com. We'll see you in the next one.